The motion sensor flickered on as I approached the glass doors at 6:42 in the morning. I swiped my badge across the reader and waited for the familiar beep. Instead, a red light flashed. Denied. I frowned and tried again, slower this time, making sure the sensor caught the full swipe. Red light. Denied again. My stomach tightened as I grabbed the door handle and pulled. Locked solid. Through the glass, I could see my workstation in the distance, but something looked wrong. The monitors were dark. The desk looked empty, stripped clean like nobody had ever sat there. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from Daniel Hayes, my boss. Don't come in. HR will handle your exit. I stared at those words until they blurred. Exit? What exit? I hadn't quit. I hadn't been fired. Nobody had said anything to me about leaving. I pounded on the glass once, then twice, hard enough that my palms stung. A security guard glanced up from his desk inside, made brief eye contact with me, then deliberately looked away and pretended he hadn't seen anything. My name is Alex Torres, and in that moment standing outside those locked doors, I swore Daniel Hayes would regret underestimating me. I practically ran back to my car, fumbling with my keys as panic started setting in. I threw myself into the driver's seat and immediately pulled out my phone, opening my work email app. Loading, then error. Account does not exist. I tried logging into the company cloud storage where I kept 5 years' worth of project files, research data, client presentations. Access denied. User not found. Everything was gone. Completely wiped like I'd never existed. I called the HR main line with trembling fingers. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I called again. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, someone picked up but immediately hung up when I said my name. They were screening my calls. Someone had given explicit instructions not to talk to me. I sat there in my car staring at my phone, trying to process what was happening. 5 years of my life. 60-hour weeks. Sacrifice weekends and holidays. Projects I'd built from nothing. All erased overnight without explanation, without warning, without even the basic courtesy of a conversation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Marcus, one of my old teammates. They hired someone new this weekend. She's already sitting at your desk. The words hit me like a physical blow. I drove back to the office and parked across the street where I had a clear view through the large windows into our department. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. There, right at my desk, sat a young woman I recognized immediately. Stephanie, the intern I had personally trained for the past 3 months. The same intern I'd stayed late helping, teaching her our systems, sharing the tricks and shortcuts I'd learned over 5 years. She was wearing what looked like my ID badge clipped to her shirt. My stomach twisted violently. The betrayal felt physical, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. Then Daniel appeared in my line of sight, walking over to Stephanie's desk with that fake smile he always wore when he wanted something. He leaned against the desk, laughing at something she said, looking completely relaxed and satisfied. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He lifted his phone, angled it toward himself and Stephanie, and took a selfie. I watched him type something on his phone, probably a caption for social media. I could imagine what it said. New beginnings or fresh start, or some other garbage meant to erase me from the narrative. He'd planned this. Every step. He'd locked me out, deleted my access, hired my replacement, all while I was at home over the weekend completely unaware. Rain started drumming against my windshield as I sat there watching them through the window. The sound matched the chaos in my head. I felt tears burning in my eyes and tried to hold them back, but they came anyway. I sobbed until my throat burned raw and my chest ached from the effort of breathing. 5 years. I'd given this company 5 years of my best work. I'd sacrificed relationships, missed family events, turned down job offers from competitors because I believed in what we were building. And this was how it ended. Locked out like a criminal. Replaced like a broken piece of equipment. Erased overnight. But then as the tears slowed and my breathing steadied, something else took over. Rage. Cold, clear, focused rage that pushed through the hurt and sharpened my thinking. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and sat up straighter. You erased me overnight? I said out loud to no one. Fine. But my fingerprints are everywhere in this company, Daniel. And you're going to learn exactly what that means. I started the car, but I didn't drive home like he probably expected. Instead, I headed to a 24-hour cafe 3 blocks away. If Daniel thought he could erase 5 years of my work, he was about to discover just how wrong he was. The cafe was nearly empty at this hour. I ordered black coffee and claimed a corner booth in the back where nobody could see my laptop screen. My hands were still shaking slightly as I opened my computer, but my mind was razor sharp now. 6 months ago, after Daniel had mysteriously taken credit for one of my presentations, I'd created a backup login. Just a safety measure, something I'd set up on my personal time using a ghost email account he didn't know existed. I'd told myself it was paranoid, but some instinct had pushed me to protect my work. I typed in the credentials and held my breath. The login screen spun for what felt like forever. Then suddenly folders appeared. Thousands of files. 5 years of projects, data models, client analyses, everything I'd built. My backup system had mirrored it all. I scrolled through the directories, my pulse racing. Then I found something that made me stop cold. A folder labeled Q3 Final, Daniel Edits. I'd never created that folder. I clicked it open and found my quarterly financial model from last month. The same one Daniel had presented to the board as his own work. I right-clicked on the file and checked the metadata properties. Created by Alex Torres, September 15th, 3:47 p.m. Modified by Daniel Hayes, September 16th, 3:17 a.m. He'd copied my work in the middle of the night. I opened the document and compared it line by line with my original saved version. Every formula was mine. Every conclusion was mine. Every chart, every analysis, every recommendation came directly from the model I'd spent 2 weeks building. But Daniel had done something clever. He'd scrubbed my name from the header and footer. He'd changed the author metadata to his name on the version saved to the company server. He'd even modified some of the language to sound more like his writing style, but the core substance was entirely my work. The theft was meticulous and deliberate. But he'd made one critical mistake. He hadn't known about my backup system, which meant I had the original files with intact metadata, showing the true creation dates and authors. The timestamp trail proved everything. My original file, September 15th. His modified version, September 16th at 3 in the morning. I had digital proof that he'd stolen my work and falsified the authorship. I took screenshots of every metadata field, every timestamp, every author tag. I saved them to 3 different cloud accounts he couldn't access. Then I kept digging through the other folders, looking for patterns. What else had he stolen? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, what else could I find that he thought he'd hidden? I sat back in the booth and closed my eyes, letting a memory surface from 2 months ago. Daniel had leaned over my desk one afternoon. That rehearsed smile plastered across his face like he was doing me some kind of favor. Alex, can you smooth the numbers a bit before Friday's board review? He'd asked, keeping his voice low so nobody else could hear. I'd looked up at him, confused. Smooth the numbers? You mean make them look better than they actually are? His smile hadn't wavered. I'm saying you get results, you get promoted. The board wants to see growth. Let's show them growth. I'd felt uncomfortable but hadn't pushed back hard enough. I'd adjusted some projections, made some assumptions slightly more optimistic, nothing technically dishonest but definitely painting a rosier picture than the raw data supported. The following week, Daniel had quietly stopped inviting me to client meetings. At the time, I'd thought maybe I was being paranoid. Now I understood. He'd been systematically pushing me out even then, isolating me from the clients and the board so he could take full credit for my work without anyone questioning it. He'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I'd been too focused on doing good work to see the trap closing around me. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Maya Rodriguez, a former colleague who'd left the company 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. I heard what happened. Can we meet? I replied immediately. When and where? 20 minutes later, Maya slid into the booth across from me, looking over her shoulder like she was worried about being followed. She was thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "He did this to me too," she said without preamble. "Daniel. He locked me out, took credit for my work, replaced me with someone younger and cheaper. I wanted to fight it, but I had a mortgage and no savings. I couldn't risk a legal battle I might lose." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small thumb drive, sliding it across the table to me. But I kept proof. Emails where he explicitly took credit for my analyses. Edit logs showing he copied my reports. Everything I could grab before they cut my access. I couldn't fight him alone, but maybe you can. I picked up the thumb drive, feeling its weight in my palm. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because someone needs to stop him," Maya said quietly. "And because you're tougher than I was." Just then, I glanced out the window and felt my heart skip. Daniel's black car drove slowly past the cafe. I waited until Daniel's car disappeared around the corner before I plugged Maya's thumb drive into my laptop. The files loaded slowly, and what I found made my stomach turn. Emails. Dozens of them. A clear pattern spanning 3 years. Daniel had targeted other women in the department, systematically taking credit for their work, then pushing them out when they got too senior or started asking questions. Maya wasn't the first. There was Olivia before her. And Catherine before that. Each time the same playbook. Isolate them from clients. Copy their work. Present it as his own. Then manufacture a reason to terminate them before they could build enough political capital to fight back. HR had received complaints. Multiple complaints. But every single one had been quietly buried, marked as personality conflicts, or performance issues that didn't require further investigation. Then I found the email that made everything click into place. Sent from Daniel to IT, dated last Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon. Subject line. Access changes. Body text. Please deactivate A.Torres credentials effective Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. Remove all access to systems, email, and building entry. This is a confidential personnel matter. Do not discuss with the employee. He'd planned my lockout 3 days in advance. While I was finishing projects, thinking everything was normal, he was already arranging my erasure. I pulled out a napkin and grabbed a pen from my bag, needing to organize my thoughts on paper. I wrote 3 goals at the top. 1. Gather ironclad proof. 2. Find allies who can corroborate the pattern. 3. Expose everything in a way that forces the company to act. I couldn't just go to HR. They'd already proven they'd protect Daniel over employees. I couldn't just threaten legal action. I had no money for lawyers and Daniel knew it. I needed to be smarter, more strategic. I needed to make this so public and so damaging to the company's reputation that they'd have no choice but to take action. I bought a new laptop with cash at an electronics store, something with no connection to my old work computer or personal devices. I set up encrypted cloud backups under a completely new email account. I organized all the evidence into clear folders. Daniel's work theft, the pattern of targeting women, HR's failure to investigate complaints, the IT email proving premeditated lockout. Then I noticed something interesting. One of the shared spreadsheets I still had access to through my backup login showed Daniel's user account actively logged in right now. I could see his cursor moving in real time. An idea formed. Dangerous but potentially valuable. What if I could bait him into revealing more? What if I could get him to incriminate himself while he thought I was locked out and powerless? I opened the shared spreadsheet where Daniel's cursor was blinking, editing cells in the revenue projections for next quarter. I waited until he deleted a row of data, then I immediately restored it from the version history. His cursor paused, stopped moving entirely. I could almost feel his confusion through the screen. Then a comment bubble appeared next to one of the cells, tagged to my old account name. Go home, Alex. My heart pounded, but I typed back quickly. I'm already home, Daniel. Right here in your system. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then his cursor started moving frantically, checking the access logs, trying to figure out how I was still logged in. I watched him navigate to the user management panel. Then suddenly my connection dropped. Session terminated. He'd realized I still had system access and had forced me out. But it was too late. I'd already downloaded everything I needed, and more importantly, I'd rattled him. Now he knew I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Now he knew I still had access to information he thought he'd taken away. And scared people make mistakes. I was counting on that. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but when I played the message back, it was just breathing and then a hang-up. He was trying to intimidate me. It wasn't going to work. I needed someone inside the company who could help, someone with enough authority to take action if presented with the right evidence. I thought about the HR department and dismissed it immediately. They'd already proven themselves useless. Then I remembered Danielle Kim, an HR manager who'd transferred from another division 3 months ago. She had a reputation for actually investigating complaints fairly, which was probably why she'd been quietly shuffled into a role with limited authority. I sent her a carefully worded email from my personal account, asking if we could speak confidentially about a sensitive matter regarding data integrity and company ethics. To my surprise, she responded within an hour. We agreed to meet at a neutral location that evening. When I sat down across from her at a quiet restaurant, Danielle got straight to the point. I've heard rumors about Daniel Hayes for weeks, she said quietly. But every time I try to pull files or investigate, I hit walls. His projects are flagged as executive-level confidential. If you want to actually get him removed, you'll need evidence that demonstrates clear financial harm to the company. Something that makes the board care. I nodded, already thinking. What if I could prove he's been falsifying revenue projections to inflate his bonus calculations? Her eyes sharpened. Can you prove that? Give me 48 hours, I said. I spent the next 2 days cross-referencing Daniel's quarterly reports against the actual revenue data from our client billing systems. The backup access I still had gave me visibility into the raw numbers, the real figures before Daniel smoothed them for presentations. What I found was worse than I'd expected. He'd been systematically inflating projected revenue by 15 to 20% every quarter for the past 2 years. Not enough to trigger immediate red flags, but enough to make his performance look exceptional. Enough to justify the massive bonuses he'd been collecting. The real revenue always came in lower, but by then he'd already collected his payout and could blame market conditions or client delays. It was systematic fraud, and I had the spreadsheets to prove it. I was in the middle of printing everything when something alarming happened. My backup laptop screen flickered. A remote access request popped up, trying to connect to my system. Someone was attempting to wipe my hard drive remotely. Daniel must have discovered my backup login and traced it somehow. I didn't hesitate. I yanked the power cord out of the wall, forcing an immediate shutdown. The files I'd already copied were safe in cloud storage, but that was too close. He was actively trying to destroy evidence now, which meant he knew I had something dangerous, which meant I was on the right track. I needed to bait him into making another mistake, something I could document and use as additional evidence. I created a decoy file and labeled it Confidential Audit, Revenue Discrepancies Draft. Inside, I put just enough real information to look legitimate, but nothing he didn't already know I had. Then I uploaded it to a shared folder I knew he monitored, one that had limited access but that he'd granted himself administrative privileges to without proper authorization. I set up the file with tracking embedded in the metadata, a trick I'd learned from an IT security workshop years ago. Anytime someone opened the file, it would automatically send me a timestamped notification with the user's account information. I waited. 16 minutes later, my phone pinged. File accessed by D. Hayes. Timestamp. 2:47 p.m. location. Company network. He'd taken the bait. Even better, by accessing a file marked confidential audit without proper clearance or legitimate business need. He'd just committed another policy violation I could document. I took screenshots of the access logs, the timestamp, his user credentials. More evidence for the pile. Daniel was making this easier than I'd expected. Arrogance had made him sloppy. He'd gotten away with this pattern for so long that he'd stopped being careful. Maya texted me late that night with crucial information. Daniel's presenting to the board tomorrow at 10. He's using your Q4 strategy deck. Thought you should know. This was perfect. I'd been looking for an opportunity to catch him in the act, and here it was being handed to me. I called Maya back. Can you get me into the building tomorrow morning before the meeting? I still have my old contractor badge, she said. It might work on the side entrance. Meet me at 8. The next morning, I arrived early with a small recording device I'd purchased specifically for this purpose. Maya's badge worked on the side entrance, and we slipped into the building quietly. The executive conference room was on the 3rd floor, but I didn't need to get inside. The hallway outside had ventilation grates that carried sound remarkably well. I discovered this years ago during late-night work sessions. I placed the recording device behind a plant in the hallway, positioned perfectly to pick up voices from inside the conference room. Then Maya and I left quickly before security could spot us on cameras. At 10:15, my phone pinged with audio being captured. I listened to the live feed through my headphones. Daniel's voice came through clearly, presenting my strategy deck to the board, taking credit for months of my work. Then came the part one needed. One of the board members asked, "This analysis is quite sophisticated. Who developed the underlying models?" Daniel's response captured perfectly. "Of course it's my analysis. Alex couldn't handle numbers at this level." I saved the audio file immediately, uploading copies to 3 different secure cloud accounts with timestamps proving when it was recorded. Then I spent an hour carefully editing together a 2-minute clip that included Daniel's explicit claim of authorship alongside the metadata from the original files showing I'd created them. The contrast was damning. His voice claiming credit, the timestamps proving theft. I encrypted the file and sent it to my personal email account with the subject line, "Insurance." Then I did something that felt simultaneously terrifying and necessary. At 2 in the morning, using an anonymous email account created through a VPN connection that couldn't be traced back to me, I sent a message to the company's board of directors. The message was brief and direct. Before you celebrate Daniel Hayes's performance, I recommend verifying the authorship of his work. The attached metadata may be enlightening. I included screenshots of the file properties showing creation dates and authors, side by side with Daniel's presentations. No audio yet. No accusations. Just facts and a suggestion to look closer. Then I waited. At 2:14 a.m., I received a read receipt notification. The CFO, Thomas Brennan, had opened the email. At 2:19, another read receipt. The board chair had opened it. I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, knowing I'd just lit a fuse. The question was how long it would take to reach the explosion. 2 days of complete silence followed. Daniel posted on social media about leadership and vision, looking completely confident and untouchable. Internally, I heard nothing. No response to my anonymous email. No indication anyone cared. I started to wonder if I'd miscalculated. Maybe the board was protecting him. Maybe they didn't care about evidence. Then, on Thursday morning, an email hit the entire company's inbox simultaneously. Subject: Mandatory Audit Notice. Due to ongoing financial reviews, all department heads will participate in mandatory interviews with external auditors beginning Monday. This is a routine compliance measure. Please cooperate fully. Routine compliance measure. That was corporate speak for something's very wrong and we're investigating. Daniel would know exactly what this meant. I watched the office from my usual spot across the street. Through the windows, I could see people clustered in groups, talking nervously. Daniel's office door was closed, which was unusual. He typically kept it open to project accessibility. At 3 that afternoon, an HR coordinator I vaguely recognized called my personal cell phone. "Ms. Torres, this is calling from the company's external audit team. We'd like to schedule a confidential interview with you regarding data management practices in your former department. Would you be available tomorrow?" "I'll make myself available," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Excellent. And Ms. Torres, we want you to know that whistleblower protections are in place. You can speak freely." The investigator's office was in a neutral building downtown, not the company headquarters. The woman who greeted me was in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. She introduced herself as Patricia Vance, forensic accountant. MS. Torres, thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to a chair. We've been reviewing financial records and found some concerning discrepancies. Your name appears as the original author on numerous documents that were later attributed to Daniel Hayes. I spent 3 hours walking her through everything. The stolen quarterly reports, the pattern of targeting female employees, Maya's testimony and the thumb drive evidence, the metadata trails, the falsified revenue projections, the recording of Daniel explicitly taking credit for my work. Patricia took notes steadily, her expression never changing, but I could tell she was cataloging every detail. Toward the end, she slid a document across the table to me. This is a formal whistleblower agreement. It provides you legal protection from retaliation and ensures confidentiality during the investigation. It also means you're committing to testify if this proceeds to legal action. I picked up the pen without hesitation and signed my name. We already have testimony from 3 other former employees matching your account, Patricia said quietly. You're not alone in this. And Ms. Torres? We'll keep you protected throughout this process. I left that office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time, someone with actual authority was taking this seriously. The following Tuesday, I was having coffee at my usual cafe when my phone exploded with notifications. News alerts, text messages, social media mentions. I opened the first news alert and felt satisfaction wash over me like warm water. Executive removed pending investigation at major firm. The article was brief but devastating. Daniel Hayes had been escorted out of the building by security in the middle of a management meeting. The company released a terse statement about an ongoing investigation into data fraud and misappropriation of intellectual property. No details, but enough to make it clear this was serious. My phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. You think you've won? Daniel's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. They'll replace me with someone else just like me. The company will move on. And you'll still be locked out, unemployed, forgotten. I felt remarkably calm. I'm not trying to win, Daniel. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. You have no idea what you've started, he hissed. I have lawyers. I have connections. I will bury you. I ended the call without responding. 10 minutes later, Maya texted me. Holy hell. You're trending on professional social media. Someone leaked the audio recording. I checked and found the clip had been posted by an anonymous account. Daniel's voice, clear as day, claiming credit for work that provably wasn't his. The post had been shared thousands of times in less than an hour. 3 days later, I received an email that made me read the sender line 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. It came from Thomas Brennan, the CFO who'd been on the board for 12 years. Ms. Torres, on behalf of the board of directors, I would like to discuss your potential return to the company under a revised role. Would you be available for a conversation this week? I agreed to meet him at a restaurant, neutral territory where I'd feel safer than in a company building. Thomas arrived exactly on time, looking exhausted but sincere. I owe you an apology, he said before I could even sit down. The board failed you. HR failed you. We allowed a toxic pattern to continue because Daniel produced results, and we didn't look closely enough at how he was producing them. Why now? I asked. Why does it matter now when it didn't matter for 3 other women before me? He looked uncomfortable, which was appropriate. Honestly? Because you made it impossible to ignore. The evidence you compiled, the public pressure, the potential legal liability. You forced us to act. That's not good enough, I said. But it's a start. He slid a folder across the table. We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Data Integrity. You'd have authority to implement new oversight systems, report directly to the board, and ensure this never happens again. The salary is substantial, and we'll provide full back pay for the time you were improperly terminated. I took 3 days to think about the offer. Part of me wanted to tell them all to go to hell, to find a job somewhere else and let them deal with the consequences of their own negligence. But another part of me recognized the opportunity. I could implement real change. I could protect other people from what happened to me. I could make sure Daniel's playbook never worked in this company again. On Thursday morning, I walked through those same glass doors I'd been locked out of weeks earlier. This time, when I swiped my badge, the light turned green immediately. The door unlocked with a satisfying click. I stepped into the lobby and felt every head turn to look at me. Some people looked guilty. Others looked curious. A few looked genuinely happy to see me back. I walked to the elevator with my head high, rode to the third floor, and found my new office. It was twice the size of my old cubicle, with windows overlooking the city and my name already on the door in fresh letters. Inside, sitting prominently on the desk, was Daniel's old nameplate. Someone had flipped it upside down and left it there like a trophy. I picked it up, felt its weight in my hand for a moment, then dropped it in the trash can. I didn't need trophies. I needed to get to work making sure no one else would need to fight the battle I'd just won. Daniel's formal hearing went public 2 weeks later, and the details were even worse than I'd known. The investigation uncovered systematic fraud spanning 4 years. Revenue inflation totaling over $2 million in fraudulent bonus calculations. Intellectual property theft from 6 different employees. HR complaints that had been deliberately buried with the help of a complicit department head, who'd also been terminated. The company's board voted unanimously to terminate him for cause, which meant no severance, no references, and full repayment of fraudulent bonuses. His professional certifications were under review by the licensing board. Several clients had already pulled their contracts citing ethics concerns. Stephanie, the intern who'd replaced me, resigned quietly and issued a public apology saying she'd been manipulated and hadn't understood the full situation. I watched the news coverage from my office, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes. Vindication, absolutely. But also a kind of sadness. He thought cruelty was power, I said quietly to Maya, who'd stopped by to watch with me. But it was just weakness wearing a mask. A journalist from a major business publication called requesting an interview and a statement. I declined the interview, but agreed to provide one brief quote. No comment on the specifics, but I hope this case demonstrates that documentation and persistence matter, and that no one is too powerful to be held accountable. The company issued a formal public apology to me and the other women Daniel had targeted. HR revealed something I hadn't known. Daniel had never actually filed termination paperwork for me. In his arrogance and haste, he'd simply had IT cut my access and assumed that would be enough to make me disappear. Legally, I'd been employed the entire time, which meant the company owed me full back pay and benefits for all the weeks I'd been locked out. The settlement included 6 months of back salary, restoration of all my benefits, and a substantial additional payment for the harm caused. But more importantly, they accepted my conditions for returning. I submitted a 10-page proposal for new oversight systems. Every project would require clear authorship documentation. HR would be required to investigate all complaints within 30 days with written findings. Employees would have access to an independent ombudsman for ethics concerns. The board would receive quarterly reports on department management practices. They approved everything. I hired Maya as my first staff member to help implement the new systems. Together, we built training programs, created transparent documentation requirements, and made sure every employee knew their rights. The culture shift was slow but real. People started speaking up about problems instead of suffering in silence. Managers who'd been hiding behind authority suddenly found themselves accountable. For months after I'd been locked out, I stood in front of the full company at an all-hands meeting. Over 300 employees gathered in the main auditorium, watching me with a mix of curiosity and respect. I'd been asked to present the new ethics and integrity framework we'd implemented. Some of you know my story. I began. Some of you lived through similar experiences yourselves. What happened here wasn't an isolated incident. It was a system that prioritized results over people and allowed abuse to continue unchecked. I walked them through the new policies, the reporting systems, the protections we'd put in place. But at the end, I shared something more personal. When I was locked out of this building, standing outside those doors wondering what I'd done wrong, I had a choice. I could walk away quietly, accept that this is just how things work sometimes, let the injustice stand. Or I could fight back using every tool I had. documentation, persistence, and faith that the truth eventually matters. The room was completely silent. I chose to fight. Not because I'm braver than anyone else, but because I realized something important. When someone tries to erase you, the worst thing you can do is let them succeed. Your work has value. Your truth has power. And no one has the right to take that away from you. The applause started slowly, then built until the entire room was standing. Later that day, I received an email from the board chair. The cultural change you've created here is remarkable. Thank you for giving us a second chance to be the company we should have been all along. 1 year after being locked out, I arrived at the office just as the sun was rising, painting the glass doors gold. I held my new master key card in my hand, the one that gave me access to every floor, every room, every system in the building. Maximum authority to do the job right. I thought about that morning a year ago, standing outside these same doors, locked out and powerless. Or so Daniel had thought. What he didn't understand was that you can lock someone out of a building, but you can't lock them out of their own knowledge, their own evidence, their own determination to make things right. He tried to erase me overnight, delete me like I was just data in a system that could be wiped clean. But the moment that door closed in my face, I realized something he'd never learned. I didn't need his permission to walk back in. I just needed patience, strategy, and evidence. I'd built my career on documentation and precision. Turning those same skills against him had been almost too easy. Every email I'd saved, every file I'd backed up, every timestamp I'd preserved. They'd all become weapons he never saw coming. I swiped my card, and the doors unlocked with that familiar, satisfying click. I walked into the building I'd helped build, leading a department I'd created from nothing, protecting people who deserved someone in their corner. When someone shuts you out, you don't break their door. You build something better right next to it, and you make sure the door to your building stays open for everyone who needs it.